Welcome everyone to the Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, July 19th, 2016. Good to see all of you here tonight. Just as a reminder to all of the folks in the audience, if you could please silence your cell phones so we don't have any abrupt interruptions. I'll go ahead and call to order our regular meeting. We did meet prior to this in a special session for interviews for openings on the Zoning and Design Review Board, and those tallies will be announced later in this agenda. So I'll go ahead and ask our Town Clerk, Michelle Dami. First of all, welcome back, Michelle.
Thank you.
It's been many meetings since you've been here, and you're very welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
And look forward to asking you to call the roll.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller.
Here.
Councilmember Durham.
Here.
Councilmember Dorenbecker. Here. Mayor Dunbar.
Here. If I can ask former Vice Mayor and Councilmember Richard Hall to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next up is adoption of tonight's agenda. I don't believe we have any corrections or changes, so is there a motion to adopt?
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? That passes unanimously. The aforementioned former Vice Mayor, I'm going to invite to join me at the podium so we can give a presentation and proclamation recognizing the many years of dedication and service that you've given to our community. So please join me at the podium. Do I have to wear a coat?
It was too hot to bike over in my jacket.
That's okay.
You're going to read all of that?
I'm going to read all this. It's your fault.
Give me my money's worth here.
If you weren't as active, I would have a much shorter proclamation. But this is a proclamation for Richard Hall. Whereas Richard Hall was initially elected to the Yountville Town Council on November 2, 2010, and re-elected on November 4, 2014, and has served as Vice Mayor since April 13, 2015. And whereas Richard Hall's public service has been marked by a sincere commitment to the best interests of the town of Yountville, with highlights including certification of the town's housing element and support for increased affordable housing, major town park renovations, the reconstruction of Madison and Yount streets, water and wastewater facility modernization, completion of the Hopper Creek Flood Mitigation Project, the establishment of citizen parks and recreation and arts commissions, and the seismic renovation of this historic town hall. Whereas Hall deftly applied his professional financial expertise to address the town's funding needs, worked to ensure the town adopted balanced annual budgets, championed utility rate restructuring, and the establishment of a fully funded OPEB, or Other Post-Employment Benefits Irrevocable Trust, and supported increasing town fund reserves. Whereas Hall represented the town as a delegate on numerous regional intergovernmental agencies, including the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, Napa County League of Governments, and Napa County Flood Control and Water Conservation District, and served on the Napa County Gang and Youth Violence Commission and Watershed Information Center and Conservancy Board. Whereas Hall served as a council representative on the Citizen Advisory Go Green team and helped develop a climate action plan to guide the town's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote environmental sustainability. Whereas Richard has been active in the community on many levels, including with the Yountville Elementary School and Parks and Recreation youth events, coaching and sponsoring Yountville Little Kickers, volunteering with Yountville Focus and Yountville Kiwanis Club, and chairing the Yountville School Foundation. Whereas Richard Hall served with a commitment to the needs and interests of our residents while always prioritizing fiscal responsibility. His sense of humor, passion for his family and friends, and his zest for life shine from the dais and throughout our community. Now therefore be it resolved that I, John F. Dunbar, Mayor of the Town of Yountville, on behalf of the entire Yountville Town Council, do hereby express respect and sincere appreciation to Richard Hall for his many contributions to the Yountville community and thank him for his dedicated service as a Yountville council member and vice mayor. So,
Thank you.
Congratulations. For everybody watching at home. So there's that. Now we have a little something else for you from the council and the staff. You might be aware of some of this, but maybe not all of it.
I don't know.
But if I could be joined by the rest of the council, this is our attempt at providing a bottle of your favorite wine. That may not be the official label,
Official label?
but we also have a little something else for you.
Lots of cookies.
Well, I don't know if I can get all the way home with these. Thank you.
Just so everybody understands, Richard has always been the sweet tooth cookie eater of the council, and so we wanted to make sure he had plenty to take home with him, and at least one box per child.
I was going to say, they won't make their way behind the dais. So
So
I'm going to just be very brief.
be as long as you'd like.
But I'm going to wait till Jeff sits down.
Last chance.
Well, yeah. So is this thing on? Okay. So I'll be very brief because I know you guys want to be out of here before 10 p.m. tonight. And I did want to say again, thank you so much for the opportunity to serve you as residents of our community, and thank you for what you do to this community or for this community, because it's a lot of work, and it's hard to express to people who don't have that experience or exposure what you really do put in and commit. And so the entire community is grateful for that. I'm going to miss my time, but I know you're going to carry the torch. So best of luck to all of you. And I'm sure you will see me either frequenting our restaurants and or frequenting your spaces in your homes, because I trust that you won't kick me out the next time I need a place to crash when I can't get back to Napa. So thank you again so much for all of this. And I promise to try to get at least one of these cookies back to the house. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you to all the staff too. See if I can make my way back out. I'm glad I have my basket on my bike. I'll be okay.
There you go. If you need to leave some of those behind,
Not likely. Yeah, Kim can help me. See, Jeff, you will get out of here by 10.
oh, and by the way, you do have that nameplate right there
I can take this
that goes
too?
with you.
You want me to keep the little plastic?
Whatever your
Whole
choice.
thing is yours.
I'll let you have that. for the
Thank
next-
you,
for the next
Richard.
person.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Because we didn't budget for a new plastic plate holder.
And we hope that your family's looking forward to your additional time available to them.
Let's see.
Yeah, start with the cookies, and that'll be a good sign. So next up is public comment for anybody that's here tonight that would like to address the council on an item that is not on our agenda. So now would be the time to do that if you are interested. Please come forward and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Pam Reeves, and I live at 6887 Jefferson Street. And you may or may not have seen my letter to the editor in the Yountville Sun, but I thought I would bring a copy for everyone, including the town clerk.
Yep.
Thank you.
There's 7 of them, one for the town administrator as well. I thought that I would like to elaborate a little bit on my letter, and also hope that the council will bring this up for discussion at a later time. I know you can't do that tonight, but I am hoping that something will come out of it. I wrote the letter to shine a light, pun intended, on the brightness and the health issues that I perceive and that others in the town also perceive with the changeover of new lighting and the addition of lighting in town. I understand that you are literally shooting in the dark, another pun, with conceptual plans, and that I'm hoping that you will also understand that in reality, these plans need tweaking upon implementation. And I think that the sentiment of over brightness and over lighting in town is quite common, and that I have met with and talked with many residents who feel a little bit disenfranchised by what they perceive as a lack of availability or a lack of willingness to talk about alternatives to some of the changes, especially the lighting. And so I feel like I needed to write that letter because our town especially, and most governments, are responsive to the population. And I think that people need to be reminded that if they speak up, if they participate, that things can change. And I know that engineering and technological specifications often need modification when humans are involved. The human element and the human component is different than what you might expect in a strictly scientific experiment that can be recreated. I don't think you can recreate human reactions very easily. So I want to express the fact that I'm concerned about the health issue of LED lighting in town. I understand that it's desirable from an energy savings point of view, but I do know that there are mitigations that can be used, and that it seems odd to me that staff hasn't been very responsive in trying to assist residents who are bothered by the lighting. So there might be something in progress now, but I think that specifically in the Yountville Park, which is a brand new installation of many lights, many more than were suggested during the planning stage. If you're familiar with the Field of Dreams and that famous statement, build it and they will come, I think it applies to this, light it and they will come. There's a tremendous uptick in the use of the park after hours, after dark, because it's lit up as if it's daylight. It's an actual invitation to people who come, who obviously think that, oh, look how convenient for me. There's a place for me to be. It's dark, but I have the ability to see and do what I want to do in this park. I think that was an unintended consequence of the lighting, but nevertheless, it is a consequence. And I think there are several options that could be employed to mitigate that. Either the lighting is on timing devices, or you shut off half of the lighting, because there's way more lighting in that section of the park, which is about equal to what Vandelore Park is in in area, but there's twice as many lights there. And I understand that the path needs lighting, but we don't need the whole entire place to be lit up. And I think other residents who live on streets that are now lit by LED lights are also feeling that encroachment on their rural, easy, sort of slow lifestyle, because lighting like that makes 24-hour activity very easy. So I hope that the council will bring this up in another session and allow residents to be able to talk freely, openly, and without fear of condemnation or fear of being wrong. We know you went through a big process to create this whole scenario, but the truth is that a lot of people who've been on the council previously have done a lot of other things that took a lot of time and that they thought was the best thing, and it turned out not to be. So I hope you're open to that idea as well. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing your concerns forward. As you noted, we're not allowed to engage in dialogue on items not on the agenda, but certainly staff has heard, and we all have your statement.
If I may, Mayor, first of all, as many of the council know, we are actually at a staff level doing some analysis and research to address some concerns. So the first thing I will share is some of you do know that. Some of you that are in the audience know. What I will say is some people have requested additional lighting, but what I will point out, we've done research with the City of Davis, and the City of Davis and its community had some significant discussions on LED. So from a staff perspective, we are also working with the lighting manufacturer Halophane to learn about different tools. The LED lighting is evolving. So the first thing I will say is, as we tried to share with you, we're working on that. We're working on guidelines for commercial corridor, where the 3,000 Kelvin lights will be used in commercial corridors, crosswalks, and intersections, a different scale in the residential. You bring up a point, Ms. Reeves, on Yountville Community Park. The lighting in Yountville Community Park is not the typical street light that's used in the streets. It is the same lights that are used in Vandeleur Park and the same lights that have been in Town Hall for a number of years. What is, and I think you also pointed out quite eloquently, it's brand new. That park did not have lighting, but we also had safety concerns. We've had incidents, and we do have a balancing act between liability with people that are using the area and a safe conduct. Now, the good news is that Halophane is working on a dimmer and a timing element. So some of these things we're working on those, but we cannot go any quicker on some of those areas than the availability of those devices. So those are some things that I will commit. We're also working on shields where appropriate. The reason I say that is in some cases a shield is not appropriate because we've had people that don't want to see the light. And unfortunately, a street light's put in and it has a job to do. It needs to light the street in the area, and it means it has to go a certain area. The particular lights that are in the park are not able to be shielded because they are actually a straight downward light. So we're working with Halophane to try to better understand the dimmer element and the timing. So first of all, your communications to staff have been received and are working. I realize they're not going as fast as some of you would like.
And I would just say, without getting into detail, I think the town manager's gotten into even more detail than maybe was necessary at a public comment. But this council and our staff has always been very responsive to concerns from our residents. Realize you're not the only residents that have opinions on this item. There are some, as the town manager pointed out, have requested some of the changes to the area and actually appreciate that they can use the park in the evening now where they couldn't before. So we're finding it a balancing act like in so many different cases. We certainly have heard your concerns, and you've heard that the town staff is already looking at potential mitigations that can be more satisfactory. We're not going to get into a dialogue right now because we've heard your comments. But I'm just saying, you've heard response. You're welcome to contact town staff and have a direct dialogue with them going forward. But we've heard your public comment for tonight on the item. Are there any others that would like to comment on an item that's not on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely not on the agenda.
Okay.
I just want to say I'm really grateful. I live in this small little town, and I'm grateful for the lighting because it keeps our waitresses and our waiters safe when they're walking to their cars, which have to walk really far sometimes. Also, I'd like to make a little comment to our sheriff department. I had a little incident in my own family, and because of what this sheriff did, my family member all of a sudden saw the light, and it was amazing. So I want to thank you guys and thank the sheriff department for being there when they needed to be there and when they talked to him. So I just want to say thank you to you guys, thank you to the sheriff department, and thank you for the lights, because I like my girls to be safe and my wait staff to be safe. So thank you.
Thank you. And since we always have our sheriff sergeant here, and he's giving a quarterly report in a few minutes, I'm sure he'll be able to take that message back to our team. So thank you very much. Any other members of the public on an item not on our agenda? Seeing no others, I'll go ahead and move forward from public comment. Our next item is appointment of the vice mayor position. Steve, did you have or Michelle, did you have any kind of lead into this, or shall I just go ahead?
I'll give you the brief lead-in. Due to the aforementioned theatrics earlier in today's meeting, we have a vacancy in the vice mayor. And by Coun's municipal code, you have a need to fill the vacancy so that should there be an absence or in the mayor, which you will have coming up for the next meeting. So your bylaws and protocols require that you appoint the vice mayor at this meeting. So with that, that is a council determination. And with that, it will be a vote of the council majority to determine who will serve the balance. And I will point out, just for clarification, the balance of the term of the vice mayor, because it is not a permanent appointment. There is a term structure to that.
And it'll go until January.
December 6th.
Or December.
Yes.
When the new council is constituted.
Yes, generally our vice mayor is appointed in conjunction with a general municipal election. So the original term was was actually December 2nd, 2014 to December 6th, 2016, and it was originally served by former council member Lewis Chilton, who resigned and moved out of area. Mr. Hall was appointed to fill that unexpired term, and now he has resigned and moved out of the area.
What is it about the vice mayor position?
Filling that unexpired term between now and December 6th. And then and once the election has occurred, then we will reappoint vice mayor again, and that will be another 2-year term. Okay.
So with that, I will go ahead and make a recommendation, and I'm going to give some reasons for my recommendation. I think we have two very capable and qualified council members, especially. I think Councilmember Durham would understand, hopefully, being the newest appointee to the board. There may be a time in the future that it's most appropriate, but I think in fairness, we have two other council members that have served very similarly in terms of duration of term and involvement in town. But my recommendation is going to be for Councilmember Dornbecker, and I'll explain why I came to that conclusion. I do feel that her participation in town shows that she represents a significant number of residents in our community. Twice elected to the town council, I think backs up that fact. She's an active volunteer in town, and she has been a representative of this council on numerous intergovernmental agencies, as has Councilmember Moeller. I believe you're chairing the policy committee of the League of California Cities right now, and has been also involved with the Go Green team. So those factors, in addition to the fact that Councilmember Moeller and Councilmember Durham are seeking re-election, I felt like it was most appropriate for the balance of this term that I nominate and recommend Councilmember Dornbecker fill this position through December. And then we'll just see how the council is constituted then and make a determination then. So that's my recommendation. I'll make it in the form of a motion that I would recommend we appoint Marita Dornbecker to the vacant vice mayor position. And I'll welcome any dialogue from the council.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I greatly respect what you have said, and I agree with everything that's been said. And as the newest member of the council, I've learned a lot in a very short amount of time and have a lot more to learn. And because of that, I feel that Councilmember Moeller best fits this position. Given what I have seen and experienced at the meetings, outside of the meetings, I don't know all of her exact appointments, but I do know her participation with every single meeting, with her research with every single meeting, her contact with all of the constituents in Yountville, that there's no doubt in my mind, just as with Councilmember Dornbecker, that she has the best for Yountville whenever she does anything with the council and in this community. I have seen her at the my favorite meetings, which are the garbage meetings, and I've seen how she takes on that role, and I see it throughout the rest of the community. I'll be the first to admit, when I wasn't on the council, I didn't understand her position with a lot of things. But now, since being on the council, I highly respect those positions and when she has stood up for the council and when she has represented Yountville at the meetings that I have been with as well. I understand your position about the fact that she's up for re-election, but thinking about this vice mayor position, I think that's, from my perspective, sends an even stronger message to this community as to exactly who she is and why she deserves to move forward in that position. So that's my thoughts as well for the discussion.
Okay, thank you. I'll certainly invite Councilmember Moeller and then Councilmember Dornbecker to make any comments on the item.
Well, I would consider it a great honor. I feel that Yountville is extremely important to me, and to carry out, the task. I was first elected in 2008, and I, as we discussed earlier, had a very steep learning curve, but in that time I have thrown myself into each task as not only a way to learn everything I possibly could about it, but to always make it important that I represent the town. Sometimes when I voted for things, it wasn't my personal opinion, but I felt it was in the best interest of the town. So I greatly appreciate what Councilmember Dermott said, and I would like to be vice mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker.
Thank you. I highly respect Councilmember Mueller, and I appreciate very much your belief. I too would feel it a great honor, and I feel that I have served, and perhaps in this respect, I don't serve on a committee with Councilmember Durham, so he doesn't know how much I prepare for things. But I am the co-chair of the Climate Action Plan Committee. I served on the greenhouse gas.
Could somebody check and see if it's Jeremy in the back? Sorry.
I served on the greenhouse gas inventory committee. I am very active with the League of California Cities, and I believe that I do listen and respond to my constituents. That's the most important thing that I do, and that's a promise.
If you could just get closer to the mic, that would help.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Maria.
Was I doing that?
No, you weren't doing it. I think he was turning the volume up in order to capture your voice.
Yeah.
So that was causing some feedback. Thank you.
Anyway, I would be delighted to serve as vice mayor, and I think that, if the newly constituted council after the election chooses to make a different recommendation, that would be, I would be, fine with whatever they decide, or we all decide together. I would be happy to serve. So that's all I did with that.
And this is what's the challenge, especially when we have 4 people. The Supreme Court's going through the same problem right now. And we have 2 candidates that are experienced, qualified, and bring great, not that our third council member wouldn't, but very similar levels of experience and dedication to the town and commitment. And so it is a challenging choice. It sounds like there's not total agreement. There is a motion on, before the council that would require a second to move forward to a vote.
I'll second that.
I had a feeling you would. So we've had our discussion, so I think we can go ahead and vote. I'm sensing that we have, maybe we'll just do well, all in favor of the motion to appoint Councilmember Dornbecker as vice mayor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining?
I'm opposed.
Okay.
I'm opposed.
We need to hear your
Sorry, I'm opposed.
votes audibly.
Sorry. Thank
No.
you.
Yeah, so that's 2-2, so that does not pass. Is there another motion to be considered by the council?
I'll make a motion to appoint Councilmember Moeller as vice mayor.
I'll second that.
Okay. Since we've had our discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
Okay. So with that, which is what might happen with even-numbered voting, I believe what's going to happen now is we
Mayor,
lead-
did you vote? I didn't hear you vote.
I voted no to the second
Okay,
motion,
thank
so it's
you.
still 2-2.
Thank you.
The two options, we'll turn to a town attorney. One is if anyone is willing to change their vote. I think we just need to know that. And if not, then we leave the vice mayor position vacant until December.
That's correct. 2-2 vote on both is if no action's taken. So the council can put this off to another meeting in the future if the votes are expected to change. As the town manager explained, there may be some issues with the rules and procedures.
We need your button on, actually, sorry. Is the light not,
Working now?
is the light on
Mm-hmm.
there?
There you
Okay,
Okay,
it is on.
apologies for that. As the town manager explained, there might be some issues with the rules and procedures in terms of who's running the meetings, and that might have to be addressed in the absence of the mayor.
And there is, I am going to be out of town for August 3rd,
Second.
2nd, August 2, so we do need to figure out.
Yeah, I will discuss that with the town manager on how to best address that.
So if we have a vacancy with the vice mayor position, there's still the opportunity to have someone else chair that meeting.
I think potentially, are you more familiar with the rules and the regulations than that?
I'm actually,
I will say, in reviewing the staff report and looking at, it's a shall appoint a vice mayor, not a may, so it is something that should be addressed so that we do have decorum and someone to run the meeting in your absence, or if an emergency, flood, earthquake, whatever happens, we need to have a mayor or a vice mayor
Acting.
designated, because the vice mayor does perform all the duties of the mayor in his or her absence, his in this instance.
Okay, so this is going to get interesting now.
Sure.
That being said, sorry to interrupt, Mayor.
No, go ahead.
That being said, from a legal perspective, a 2-2 is as if nothing happened.
Right.
And the municipal code says as soon as practical. And if it doesn't happen tonight, then it doesn't happen tonight.
But I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, so we need to figure out if we need to vote on someone that would be a designee to represent me as a council member or an acting vice mayor for that 2-week period. I don't know that that's even possible.
Yeah, it doesn't appear that there are provisions in the code for an acting vice mayor.
So then I'll just ask the council if there's anybody that's willing to change their position for this vote. Okay.
Because I really value the, what we do, and the need for a leader to be appointed tonight. And because I think that's more important than my own feelings and ego, I will withdraw my name.
Okay, so then I'll entertain a motion, a new motion. Councilmember Durham?
So I make a motion that we nominate Councilmember Moeller as the vice mayor.
And
I'll second
you
that.
second that. So all in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I abstain.
Okay. So with that, Councilmember Moeller will be vice mayor for the duration of the unexpired term, which will be until the first week of December. Okay, well, thank you for working through that. We got to see a little protocol here tonight that is pretty unusual, but thank you, Councilmember Dornbecker. Appreciate your willingness to make that concession and your commitment to this council moving forward. So thank you for that. Before we move on to the rest of the meeting, I would invite Councilmember Moeller to, unless you wanted to stay there for the rest of this meeting, the seat to my right is the vice mayor's position. We could take a very quick recess if you wanted to reposition, or we can just stay where we are for the rest of the meeting.
I think that's fine.
Okay. So we did get through that. Now we have the clearing of the audience. We're going to move on to consent calendar. We have items A, B, C, D, E, and F submitted for action. Is there a motion for the consent calendar?
So, second.
That was motion by Dornbecker, second by Mueller. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Presentations. We have with us our assessor, recorder, county clerk. Mr. John Tudor is here to give us nothing but good news, I think.
It's very good news, not only for the town of Yountville, but for the whole county. Thank you very much for having me. I try and come every year to each of the taxing entities, of which you are one. I've been doing this for 29 years, and I hope to continue for many more. Let me just give you a brief overview of the county as a whole, and then I mostly want to talk about the town of Yountville, which is your primary concern. So we topped $35 billion this year for the assessment roll, and just to put that in perspective, that is twice the size of the assessment roll in 2003 and 70 times the assessment roll in 1966, 50 years ago. Same time Robert Mondavi founded his winery. So as you can tell, Napa County, because of the actions of elected officials like yourself and appointed officials and your staffs, has done an incredible job of managing the growth of this county, starting with the Ag Preserve in 1968, and then other steps that have been taken since then. And that makes property, homes, businesses in Napa County very valuable. And you've seen that recently in a couple of sales of properties within your small town limits. So that's why we have such a high assessed value. And we are third in the state of California of assessed value per capita. And we're just behind Marin and San Mateo and just ahead of San Francisco as a county. So we are in good shape, and we hope to continue to be that way. I did want to point out that the other major factor in our assessment roll has been the declines in value since the Great Recession in the real estate market that began in 2007. And we are beginning, and we've been beginning for the last 3 years, to bring those properties back as their values come back towards their Proposition 13 base year values. Because when we decline a value, it's temporary. So if someone paid $500,000 for their home in 2007, and this happened in American Canyon, and it was worth $225,000 only 3 years later, that is a temporary decline. This original $500,000 keeps going up by 2% a year at a maximum, and as those values come back, they come back and meet that ceiling. So we still have 4,000 properties in a decline in value status, down from our maximum of over 12,000 properties back in 2011. And just to put that in perspective, countywide, in 2012, we had $2.6 billion off the roll, meaning that those homes and businesses that were in a decline in value status were $2.6 billion combined less than their Proposition 13 base year value. This year, our increase, even with some declines in value left, was $2.3 billion, which is the largest increase in the history of Napa County in a single year. So you can tell that what I said earlier about the value of this very special place is helping to offset those kinds of declines. That $2.6 billion back in 2012 has now dropped to less than $1 billion off the roll from the 4,000 properties still in a decline in value status. And that's pretty much the general I wanted to talk about. Let's talk now about the town of Yountville. And let me just stay on that decline in value status. In 2012, the town of Yountville had $40.6 million off the roll between the declines we had here and the base year value. And to put that in context, your total assessed value this year is $715,000. It was lower than that, of course, back in 2012. So somewhere close to 10% of your value was actually 7.43% of your total value was not on the roll. That has dropped this year to $12 million, still off the roll from the few properties that are still in a decline in value status here in the town of Yountville. And that's only 1.8% of your roll. So those coming off help to contribute to your major increase, and I wanted to talk about that. So your increase this year was 11.68%, which is the highest in the entire county by municipality. Contrast that with in 2002, the city of American Canyon grew by 32% in 1 year, which was a huge boom year for them. But of course, they dropped by 26% at the height of the Great Recession. So they've had a roller coaster, whereas the town of Yountville has been much more steady in its growth. So at 11.68%, that's compared to 4.9% last year, which is 2.5 times approximately. And your growth a few years before that was only 1.78%. So you can see that the major contributor to that was the sale of one of your major properties here in the county, in the town, which sold for in the multi-millions of dollars. And you have another one of those sales that's occurred that's going to have an impact on your 2017-18 roll, because we appraise events by the calendar year. So that sale happened earlier in 2016, so you'll see that reflected in your 2017-2018 roll. Again, you can see what the paper says the sale prices are. Those are not necessarily what we enroll. There are other factors in a sale price that may not be directly related to the real property value. But the other thing that's been going on, of course, is under my direction, the Board of or not my direction, but my advice, the Board of Supervisors adopted a change to their transfer tax ordinance, which captures transfer tax on unrecorded documents. And we have gone out and collected in the tens of thousands of dollars in transfer tax, half of which come to the town of Yountville if those transfers occur within your town limits. So that's another element that's going on the side that will continue to improve your revenues, and we hope that will move forward depending on what kind of transfers of property, both recorded and unrecorded, take place. The final thing I wanted to talk about, which doesn't look like good news, and I think you have this in your packet, is non-residential new construction. Now, this figure is primarily for the benefit of the town manager and your finance director because it has to do with your appropriation limit. And as you may recall, I'm not sure all of you were on the council. You may not have been, Mr. Durham. But you put an item on the ballot. Was that in 2014? Michelle, or was it in 2012? Do you recall?
I don't recall.
I think it was 2014. You had an initiative, or not an initiative, you had a vote of the people to raise your appropriation limit to allow you to spend the money you were collecting for the benefit of the citizens and the residents of the town of Yountville. So that's because you were earning more money than your town limit would normally be established. Where this figure comes in, non-residential new construction, is you get to make a choice, which will be brought to you by your staff sometime in the next few months, to set your appropriation limit, and you have a choice between the increase in personal income or the increase in non-residential new construction. And as you know from the media coverage, personal income's been pretty stagnant for most people for the last several decades. But in this case, unfortunately, you had zero increase in non-residential new construction. You did have some vines come out of exemption, but the removal of a major kitchen facility from one of your wonderful restaurants actually offset that, so that you had zero increase in non-residential new construction. But because you are already above the limit and by the vote of the people who have approved that, this will have absolutely no impact on you going forward, and you will probably have to have another measure on the ballot 2 years from now, because these are 4-year appropriation limit changes by the voters to present that to the voters again. So that pretty much covers what I had to say. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and then I'd like to talk just very briefly about the upcoming election.
Okay, and we've been in a very advantageous position to have to continually go back to a vote of the people about that appropriations limit because we have been able to exceed it almost every cycle. So that's a good problem to have.
Right, and that's a combination not only of your property taxes, but your sales taxes and your transient occupancy taxes are all put into the pot to determine what your appropriation limit is.
Right. I'll ask the first question. You mentioned transfer tax. The town would keep 50% of transfer tax. Who gets the other 50?
The county does.
Just the county. It doesn't. None goes to the state.
No, absolutely not. It's a completely local tax. The federal government used to collect that as an excise tax. In 1967, they abandoned that tax and repealed it. The state was allowed to move in. They passed a statewide tax or a statewide authorization. It's only local governments. No one else touches it. And the county and the towns agreed in 67, and it's been that way ever since, that if it happened within the town, we split the revenue. If it happens in the unincorporated area, the county keeps it all.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me,
Right.
to be honest.
Right.
Is it restricted or unrestricted for the county?
It's unrestricted also. I mean, that counts towards their appropriations limit, just as yours does to you, but that's all.
Too bad we don't get half of what happens in the county. That would be a little more fair. Any other questions on this presentation before we go on to the next one? Okay. You'll switch hats to your elections hat?
Thank you. As registrar of voters, I just wanted to come, and as you understand, you have 3 positions up on the ballot, which will occur on November 8th, and your town clerk has already done all the notices in both English and Spanish, as we are now required to do. And the filing opened Monday and will close on August 12th. I did want to point out, and I'd be happy if the town attorney wanted to talk to me later, I believe because of Vice Mayor Hall's resignation, there is no incumbent in that seat, and so therefore should Councilmember Dorenbecker and Councilmember Mueller both file, the filing will close on August 12th.
It's actually Councilmember Durham and Mueller, but
Durham and Mueller, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your comments. So if they both file for re-election and the vacant seat is open also, and of course you run against each other at large, and the top 2 or 3, in this case 3 vote getters are elected out of however many run. There's no runoff provision. Filing will close on August 12th. There will be no extension if an incumbent doesn't file because former Vice Mayor Hall's seat is considered vacant.
So my understanding was that was considered a separate special election. It would be a separate filing for the 2 years of unexpired term left on the vice mayor. Is that not correct?
I understand it the way we understand it, so I would have to check in with the attorney if there's anything different, but.
No, that's correct. Technically 2 separate elections, but because they're being held and consolidated with the statewide general election, then the filing dates are all the same. So even though they're 2 separate, they're running concurrently.
But to just be clear, it's not the 3rd highest vote getter that gets put into the 2-year unexpired term. It's a separate election for that 2-year seat
That is correct.
on the same ballot this November.
That's right. And again, the highest vote getter in that special election would take that seat. If Councilmember Durham and Councilmember Mueller run against 4 or 5 other people, the top 2 out of those total package would be elected. Even
to the 2 4-year terms, but
not the
they would have no bearing on
the 2-year term.
On the 2-year term,
right.
Yeah.
And I'm
but
sure
the deadlines are the same for both.
The deadlines are the same, and I'm sure the clerk is making sure people understand which one they're filing for.
Exactly. When candidates or when individuals come in to pull nomination papers, they will have to designate at that time if they want the 4-year seat or the 2-year seat, and that needs to be made clear when they circulate their petitions.
Yeah, it's just I want to say it again, just for total clarity, that if there is a 3rd person running for one of the 2 4-year terms, that third person doesn't automatically get the 2-year unexpired term. That's handled separately.
Correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's just, I think we've said it about 3 times now, so
But you
we'll
can't,
say it again in a week or two.
with
but-
elections, you can't say it often enough.
Right.
So, because we find that elections, as you saw in the June election, with all the parties and no party preference, can be very confusing for voters. So I think both the town attorney and the town clerk have done a great job in educating the residents of and the registered voters of the town of Yountville about what's going to be happening in November.
And what is our status in terms of mail-in, having an election location for drop-off ballots?
Yountville, we're doing another study because the 88th day before the election is August 12th. So sometime before August 12th, we will review all of the precincts in Yountville to see if any have converted back to a polling place. Currently, they are all vote by mail. You will have, as you did in June, the Vote by Mail Assistance Center, which is open not only to the residents of the town of Yountville, but to all members of all registered voters in Napa County to come and drop off their ballots, or if they lose their ballot. We actually had a dog eat part of a ballot in this last election, and that person brought in the ballot, tried to tape it back together, but we gave him a new ballot so that he could have a clean ballot to go through our counting machines. So that will be open again from Saturday before the election, which will be the 8th, 7th, from Saturday the 5th through Election Day, November 8th.
And you're obviously aware of the challenges we have with some of our Veterans Home members that are mobility challenged or limited, so the mail-in or the polling station matters kind of uniquely for that population.
Right, and we've found that our turnout at the Veterans Home has increased from when we converted from polling places to the 2 precincts that are at the Veterans Home to vote by mail. So it seems to have met with their needs. And of course, on one occasion, not this election, but back in 2014, one of the Veterans Home residents, who was 97 years old, forgot to sign her ballot return envelope. And so I brought it out to bring to her so she could sign it. Unfortunately, that day she was out on a field trip, so the ombuds person at the Veterans Home had her sign the ballot and then delivered it here to our Vote by Mail Assistance Center. So I appreciate you raising that, and so that the residents of the home and all the residents of Yountville know we're available to help with any of those kinds of things, including my personal delivery if needed.
Very good. That's appreciated. Any questions from the council? No,
Great.
thank you for both of your updates and presentations. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar.
We're going to move next to our CAL FIRE quarterly report, and I believe we have a special guest here for that. Battalion Chief Joe, is it Buckmeyer?
Yeah.
All right.
Battalion Chief, CAL FIRE, Napa County Fire. I'm going to give you a little breakdown of the spreadsheet that's in the back of the paperwork there for call types and response areas. So out of 433 calls, we had 292 medical aids, 17 public assists, 56 traffic collisions, 3 vehicle fires, 30 alarm soundings, 12 structure fires, 3 vegetation fires, 1 miscellaneous fire, 2 rescues, 9 hazardous conditions, and tree and power lines down 8. So the breakdown of response areas for that is in the town of Yountville, there's 71 of those calls took place in the town of Yountville. And again, in the back there in the spreadsheet, there's a little more breakdown for what call types were there. At the Veterans Home alone, there was 206 calls. Most of those were medical aids. County areas, outlying county areas, 153 calls. In Napa City, we did 3 assists. We have an auto aid agreement with the city, so we had 3 assists within the city. These numbers are very typical for fire department responses. Medical aids dominate the type of calls that we go to. So some of a few of the major events that took place, we had a horse rescue up in Skyline Park. A rider fell off the horse, fell with the horse down an embankment. The horse got pinned between some trees. And there's a correction in the paperwork here that says that neither one were injured, but the horse was successfully removed with the rescue team from Yountville Station out here. But they couldn't bring the horse back out of the tranquilizer they had to give it, and realized it had a broken neck, and so the owner decided to put the horse down. So the rescue, the team performed well, but unfortunately couldn't save the horse. We had a structure fire in Yountville off of Washington Street. It was a barn and an outbuilding. That was noticed when Engine 12 from Yountville was clearing, and medical aid saw smoke, responded, asked for a structure response. We got a lot of engines on scene right away. Kept it confined to the barn. The barn and the outbuilding were a total loss, but it didn't extend into the house. Also not listed here, it was, there was a little bit of a robbery that was taking place at the home. You probably heard about that. And the person had admitted to the arson as well.
And that was right at the end of a training session, I believe, too, so there was
Yes.
even additional units that were able to respond because they were all in the area already.
Everything was at the training tower. We had a bunch of stuff there, so on a slight delay, you know, whenever we're training like that, we always cover the stations also. So we had those units responding, and then as soon as people could wrap it up at the training grounds and get over there quick, we had plenty of equipment right away on scene.
Yeah.
So there was also a Calistoga structure fire that went into the vegetation, and in the safety message, I'll kind of talk briefly on that. Started in an outbuilding and then extended to the vegetation. There was about 7 to 9 acres burned there. Lake Berryessa also had a structure fire that was up at the R Ranch, and that was a total loss. Started in the kitchen, but again with the long response times, and mostly not just the long response times, but it's the time those reports get made. You know, when it's at night like that, sometimes it doesn't get noticed until someone sees a big glow, and by the time we get there, we can't do anything but keep it from going elsewhere. So special events, Father's Day car show and barbecue. You guys are probably more familiar than that than I am, but the Station 12 Explorers and personnel staffed the barbecue again. Barbecue was a hit, drove a large crowd, and you probably know a bit about the Explorer program. The funds from that help to fund the Explorer program, and that kind of exposes younger people to our job and gets them in the fire service, gets them a good start. Veterans versus Firefighters softball game. That usually goes pretty well every year. I apologize because I don't actually know who won.
They're all winners.
We do.
Everybody's-
It wasn't the firefighters.
It wasn't the
It's
firefighters.
always the mixed nuts, and we are also similarly situated with our outing with the Veterans Home Mixed Nuts.
I think there's a little New Jersey Generals thing going on there.
Yeah. I know it's always been a fun game, and everybody's a winner there. So some of the special training that took place on top of our regular monthly drills and all the other standard training that we do pretty much daily, there was a trench rescue class held out at the training grounds, and we brought some guys up from Riverside County, some LA County people, some pretty good instructors to certify our rescue team members and some of our other staff just on engines in trench rescue. So trench rescue, there's quite a bit to it that we need to know how to do properly because it becomes a confined space and there's legal stuff that has to be done, so everyone has to be certified if you're going to work in that environment. We did a live fire training out at the training grounds, and that was, we hosted the Kelseyville burn trailer, and that provides an environment where we can go in and do fire attack and various things inside of a structure that's designed to burn with propane and designed to get it hot enough that we're experiencing what we would in a regular structure fire. So it gives people live fire training and be able to learn how to do it, especially new recruits, without actually putting them in the danger right away. That can be shut right off. For the safety message, as we enter into another hot summer with drought conditions, CAL FIRE would like to remind homeowners of the importance of defensible space. So let me back up to the home that caught on fire, or the outbuilding that caught on fire in Calistoga. Part of our defensible space program is not just to defend your home or the homes from fire coming at them, but also in the event you have a fire within your house, keeps it from spreading to the wildland and getting to all the rest of your neighbors and everything else and causing a big event. So there's kind of a two-way street to the whole prevention program there. We encourage removing dead, dry vegetation within 100 feet of your home. Please remember to mow before 10 a.m. while temperatures are cool and the humidity is high. And if you want more information on that, you can go to readyforwildlandfire.org or just stop by the Yountville station. They have a lot of information there for you. Any questions?
Any questions from the council? No, thank you very much for filling in for Battalion Chief Hawks.
Thank you.
You did a great job. Thank you for being here tonight. Next up is our Sheriff's Public Safety Quarterly Report. Remember all the pressure that we said you were under for your initial quarterly report here. Yeah, it got warm in here all of a sudden,
It got a
right?
little bit hot in here when I stood up. If I go down, thankfully I've got the fire department.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. Typically, Cal Fire just kind of sits there and with a smile on their face.
Well, I don't know.
when it's the sheriff's department.
We were talking about polenta and chicken before this started, so
Okay.
if nothing else, I'll be well fed.
There you go.
I wanted to start, if it's okay, I just
course.
wanted to say thank you. Our cooperation and our partnership.
Sorry, just stay up to the microphone so we can make
Our
sure we
partnership-
record it.
Our partnership with the community means everything. It's I'm born and raised in Napa County, and I remember as a kid seeing the deputy sheriffs come through and the way that we were treated with respect. It made me look up to them and really honor them. And to hear that we made a difference in your personal life means everything. And I'm proud to go back and pass that up the chain and through my deputies, because that's why we're here. There are times when we are involved in things that people aren't exactly happy, but it is for the best good. But I'll be honest with you, I love going home at night after hearing things like that.
Yeah.
It means a lot. So thank you for sharing and saying that. So I'm going to go through a presentation that is going to look dramatically like Sergeant John Crawford's, but with different statistics, different numbers, because I did use his as a basis to go off of. So our offenses in Yountville are much like what John Tudor said. Basically, the property tax and property values were very stable. We've had 0 homicides, thankfully, 0 rapes, 0 robberies in this quarter. We had 1 assault with a weapon, 5 simple assaults, which could literally be someone throwing water on someone or shoving someone. We did have 2 domestic violence, which was up from last quarter. But as we compare to the same quarter last year, we can go and see that we are staying fairly stable for the time of year. We had a small uptick by 1 in the simple assault in this quarter compared to last year. Domestic violence was up 1. And one of the things that you may or may not be aware of, but when I look at the quarters, and I was going through the numbers for the past couple of years, and I've done this in talking to community groups in the past with a problem-oriented policing program, just as an education, is there tends to be, as things get warmer, the numbers tend to move up. As they get cooler, people tend to stay inside, and it's just kind of it's common across, at least through the Napa County, and most law enforcement that I've seen. So you will see that when you look at the quarters, and if you ask yourself, is there a specific reason why numbers move up into the spring and summer? That's not the only reason, but that can be a reason. So other offenses that were reported, looking at the residential burglaries this quarter, we had 3 this quarter. Regular or other burglaries, which could be vehicles, we had 2. We had 3 petty thefts, which would be items stolen under $950. We had 0 grand thefts, which would be items over $950. We had 2 auto thefts. And on that note, I was kind of excited because right before I came here, Cal was talking about your last auto theft. And I told him that about 7 years ago when I was working, I was doing different investigations, and I was assigned to some cases up here in Yountville. I got to know a few people fairly well. And when I was out with my family getting pizza last week, I saw a client, if you will, that I hadn't seen in a long time, that was from many of the Yountville grand thefts. And I snapped a photo because it was a car and a person I hadn't seen in a long time. Well, when I showed Cal the photo, he said, well, that looks a lot like the person and the vehicle that was involved in our vehicle theft from this last month. So I'll be following up on that, and I'm pretty excited about that. He said, how do you know that guy? I said, well, we know each other. We go way back. We're friends. So the vandalisms, you see they're fairly stable. We've gone down 1, but they've stayed pretty close to the same. And again, looking at the numbers that I just read to you compared to the same quarter last year, they're very, very close. We've actually gone down on some items, but they're very close to the same. Our calls for service this quarter, if you don't mind, actually, I'm going to leave that, and I will I'll look at our numbers on the next slide, but we'll look at calls for service. This quarter, 890 calls for service. So we are up from quarter last year, not too much, but definitely from last quarter. Our reports have gone up a little bit from the same quarter last year. Arrests are definitely up. We've almost doubled. But that is typically just based on the type of calls we're dealing with. Our citations are up a little bit, but again, you're seeing that they're staying pretty much on average. Citations are, again, up a little bit. And our parking citations are fairly stable at about 127. Thankfully, we're fairly low on our collisions, our auto collisions. Our non-injury, or the largest number that we have this quarter, is looking at 6. And our injury is 1, which is a really good thing to see. And I'm even glad to see that we have 0 fatal collisions this quarter. Again, sometimes that gets a little bit better when we're not having that wet weather. When we look comparing to the same quarter last year, again, we're down a little bit, except for the non-injury. We did spike by 2 accidents, but we're pretty stable. The officer-initiated activity for this quarter, and coming in here and having a chance to talk to Steve Rogers, and he was able to explain kind of the type of policing that fits Yountville and works well for this community. And I think the last quarter does kind of represent that, where we try to give a 25 to 30% citation and a lot of warnings, 75 hopefully % warnings. We're able to most of the time just get voluntary compliance from just talking to people and explaining why we are out there doing what we're doing. And that typically works, I'll be honest with you, that works over most of Napa County. And that's what makes it real nice to work here. So traffic stops, we're definitely up. Pedestrian checks were up a little bit. At 7, the traffic stops were 104. Patrol checks, 33, and that's typically when we're going around trying doors at night, checking businesses. We encourage that a lot because you'd be surprised, just like you talked about, coming from training and looking around and you guys end up finding a fire. We find burglary, we find all kinds of different things from just getting out of the car at night and trying doors and walking around a little bit, walking around your neighborhoods too. Vehicle checks, 15, those are up. That's basically vehicles parked where maybe they shouldn't be, and we just walk up and introduce ourselves and ask if they need anything. Our total activities, we're up to 159 this last quarter, and I imagine this next quarter you will see that rise even more just because of our weather. And that's the end of the presentation. If it's all right, I'll give you kind of a sneak peek on what you'll probably see this coming quarter.
Sergeant Crawford never did that.
Ooh, now I'm kind of excited here. I might be able to break some ground. Just with some of my history, I have had a lot of opportunities to do different types of training, and so myself and another deputy do our active shooter protocol and training for all the law enforcement in the county. So we're going to bring that and have an opportunity of this next quarter to update all of the county law enforcement and our staff here on emergency incident protocol. Basically, we all periodically at least watch the news and kind of see different things that are going on in the world that we live in. We have a very safe place that we live in, but we would like to be trained and prepared to make sure that we do what you were asking us to do. And so we're working currently on that very hard. So, any questions?
Well, just to that point, I was driving from Healdsburg through Calistoga on the afternoon of the armed robbery and shooting, yes. And yes, it's a nice quiet valley until it isn't.
Until it isn't.
That was a major event.
It was a major event, and it was punctuation to the point that we need what we are currently doing. And amazing. I was the 4th officer on scene on that, and got to spend the day and evening dealing with that. It was a great feeling to go home knowing that we had the people that we needed to have in custody to keep the community safe, and that it went well as it could have gone. Either way, it does garner support for us to be trained and be ready to do what you guys pay us to do.
Well, and there was a significant level of cooperation from multiple counties, multiple agencies, and it was, I'd say, the largest show of force that I've seen in this valley in very quick order. From the time I got the Nixle alert to when I was driving through the area with helicopters in the air and dozens of vehicles and hundreds of law enforcement, a lot of different uniforms out there that day as well.
Absolutely. We had representation from state, local, all of Sonoma County agencies were represented, Napa County agencies. It started at one point, you looked into the sky as you're searching through fields and rivers, and you looked up and you're like, I don't know that I've ever seen that many helicopters. We had a great show of support, and it was because of that we were able to secure Calistoga and accomplish what we did.
Yeah. So that turned out well. Questions, Councilmember Mueller?
I just have a comment. I just really want to speak on behalf of the entire community and say thank you to not only our police force but also CAL FIRE. We just, not that we take you for granted, but I just think it's a very special time to say a very special thank you to both of you and everybody who serves with you. So thanks.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Durham?
So as everybody, most staff in the council knows, my citation percentage is at 100% in this community for parking tickets. So I've got a question about that. One of my issues is parking with deliveries, especially in the mornings with all of the businesses that we have in town. Do we have the volunteer gentlemen issuing citations again, or is that not happening right now?
Okay, so that is happening.
Okay.
We actually, the town helped out and was able to help us get a vehicle. I wrote a policy and sent it through our chain of command today and met with the undersheriff, bless you, so that we could have him start using that appropriately. Typically in the morning, he is not normally there that early in the morning. If you give me a specific time frame, I'm happy to pass that along. That we
great.
So
No, that sounds good to know that that's going on. So that's excellent, and I will reach out to you and give you and specific areas as well. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Can I speak to that point real quick?
Oh yeah.
Real quick, I'll try to keep it short. In seeing that is a definitely an issue we want to take care of when we deal with the parking enforcement and be responsive. I've worked with the chief also over public safety at the Vets Home. And because we run into different issues and people disagreeing often about the parking citations, we will be implementing, and now they have agreed to do the same, a protocol where they photograph every citation, every vehicle, and every violation, just in hopes of getting the cooperation and the understanding from the community to say, you know, maybe you felt this way, or maybe you didn't see this way, but then when they come to me for a complaint, I can intelligently discuss it and see if maybe it is something that we can work with them on, or if not, I can show them and say, hey, this is what we were dealing with and this is why we did it. But that is something that we've rolled out in the last 2 weeks to try and assist discussions with the community about parking citations.
Great. That's good to hear. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we have had incidents where, I mean, not every illegal curb area is painted red, and sometimes common sense when you park on a curb and 3/4 of your vehicle is or all of it is blocking a traffic lane, it's not a parking space.
Correct.
So to reinforce that, because we have heard and received email complaints about, why did you pick on me? I wasn't in the lane, and then you show a photo of, yes, you were. Yeah, so that is helpful. Any other questions, Councilor Dornbeck?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for the compassion and respect you show the people in the community. Obviously, that has come across to be thanked for someone who was approached by a sheriff. So thank you very much. And our firefighters are always such great participants in the community. We really appreciate you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, we have always, even though the faces have changed over time, we have always considered our public safety as part of our community and part of our family, and you have embraced that relationship also, and it's much appreciated, as you heard earlier tonight. And same with our staff. You know, this is really a people-oriented community, and so it needs to extend to all of our different contract relationships. So thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right. With that, we do have a public hearing coming up that relates to our noise control ordinance. Looks like we have an introduction to consider.
Yes.
So let's consider it.
All right. I will be brief in order to allow enough time for the council discussion. Just really quickly for the history of this, back in May of this year, the Town Council and the Zoning and Design Review Board met together to discuss several topics. One of these were modifications to the town's noise ordinance. And some of the main topics of the noise ordinance that were discussed that evening were the time frames where operation of noisy equipment or power tools is permissible. As it stands right now in our ordinance, the construction or demolition related noisy activity when done by a contractor is permitted between 7:30 in the morning and 5 in the evening, Monday through Friday, whereas tenants and property owners can operate these power tools between 7:30 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then 9 to 8 on weekends and holidays. Conversely, when landscaping tools and equipment are involved, contractors may operate the loud equipment from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, whereas property owners and tenants can do it between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. 7 days a week. So during the meeting, it was discussed that maybe these hours should be adjusted, and a lot of ideas were thrown around, and so this then came back to the Zoning and Design Review Board on June 14th. And following that hearing with the ZDRB, the board made a few recommendations, which is now before the council. At the meeting, it was proposed that construction and demolition noisy activity would now, for a contracted service, be between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and property owners and tenants can do it from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week. When it comes to landscaping tools and equipment, it'd be 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for contracted services, and for property owners and tenants, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week. So what this ultimately would do is remove the distinction between a construction noise or landscape noise. All the times, if you've noticed, are 9 to 6 p.m. Contracted service would be Monday through Friday, whereas property owners and tenants are 7 days a week, but also 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's important to note also, this doesn't mean that work has to occur between those hours only. It means work caused by noisy equipment. That is really because it's a noise ordinance rather than a work ordinance. So if a resident or even a contracted service wanted to go and rake leaves quietly, that can occur at any time. This is right now only addressing the noise. Lastly, during the ZDRB discussion, the board also discussed contractor work on Saturday. Though the board was split on opinion, 2 members of the board showed an interest in allowing contracted service on Saturday mornings from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And the example was given saying that if a resident was working on his or her yard and wanted some assistance with them, they wanted to allow time for a contracted service. Or if a resident wanted to be present and wasn't able to be at the house Monday through Friday, could be there Saturday morning to have a contractor be there as well. That didn't receive sufficient support to become a formal recommendation, but staff believe that it is worth discussion by the council. That being said, that is not included in the draft ordinance before you because it did not garner that support during the ZDRB hearing. So with that, it's now time for council discussion. The recommendation is to conduct the public hearing, receive public comment, and after the discussion to ask questions of staff, whatever you want.
We're going to ask questions of staff first.
However order you
Before we go into the public hearing, any questions about the report itself? Councilmember Moeller, Vice Mayor Moeller?
So the question I've heard before, that sometimes we have contractors that have been working on Saturday, but I think the town manager told me our ordinance didn't allow you to stop them if they said, oh, we're not receiving money. We're getting different kinds of credit or something from whoever is contracting. Have I got that right? And does this ordinance now, if we do decide not to have contractors work at a certain period of time, allow provisions for that to be enforced?
Right now, the ordinance does not have a definition of a contracted service.
Okay.
And so the attorney might be able to give more info on what a contracted service can be as an assumption, but it's not spelled out in the ordinance.
Sure. Without a definition, it would be very broad. A contract's agreement between any two people in exchange for anything of value.
So I guess maybe is that something that we need to consider? Has that been an issue? That sometimes I've heard some of the
To clarify, what I would say is people have used, one, I'm going to go back to the real basics. Some people in the community have mistakenly believed that there is a no work requirement on the weekends. And I do want to, I think Nathan mentioned quite well that it's really no noisy work. So often what we do find is people have been complaining about something because they see work going on, even though it's not a technical noise violation. So we have had people, when we've investigated, that they will argue that, you know, these are their cousins and they're just here, they're all volunteering, and we don't have the means to follow through. If they go into the argument that they're not contracted or they're not receiving consideration. So I do think from the intent of what we're trying to do is some clarification of what contracted is or isn't probably makes sense in a definition. What we're also trying to do with that, I would say, by leveling the hours, then you're really kind of narrowing the need. And I think I would echo also and support that the council gives serious consideration to the Saturday hours, because I'll use myself as an example, a hypothetical. I kind of work during the week, and if I did need to do something on my property, because I tend to try to be a weekend warrior and some landscape projects, and sometimes I may need, and I'm just going to use myself as a personal example, I may have somebody assisting me. That theoretically could be a violation, and I think we potentially have that situation more than we might want to realize. So I do think it's a worthy consideration for, again, what's our intent? Our intent here is people don't make noise, and that they limit the noise.
But getting back to the Vice Mayor's question, the definition, as I understood our town attorney just to say, it doesn't matter if it's cash.
Correct. But I'm
It's
just saying we
work
don't
for
have-
service or compensation.
The majority of the complaints we receive haven't really gone into that, which is why it wasn't initially addressed. But if the council decides that is worth including, it definitely can be included. We just haven't received many complaints on it.
Language that defines contract may be appropriate to, at least it's on the books then, to clarify monetary or other, whatever language you would say, monetary or other compensation.
Exactly.
However you'd want to wordsmith that.
Yeah.
Because, for example, I've talked to somebody who is obviously working for the business, and I said, you know, you really can't work, you can't be, you know, a leaf blower Saturday afternoon. And they said, well, I'm not really getting paid. I work for him at his winery, and he just asked me to come over. So,
Right.
you know, just if we need that clarification.
What I would say is it's helpful to staff so that if there is an enforcement activity, we have a system and an approach that can be used. But we find often, it is fairly often that when approached, they usually come up with a defense that these people weren't being paid.
Well, and I think we started going down this path with our last conversation about the noise ordinance, and Sergeant Crawford, I think, very appropriately brought us back to say the majority of the problems are construction, major renovation of commercial work. It's not what we're starting to get into, which is the neighbor coming over and helping fix the fence with you, and that's not really, you know, the 8 hours of noise, as he pointed out. When you're building a house or a major remodel, you're making noise all day long.
And I do think, to your point, Mayor, that is one of the things that we may need to work on, because for some neighborhoods, 6 days of that level of activity by a contractor may be a bit more than they're interested. And I think that's finding that sweet spot of trying to provide balance in the neighborhood, because we've had a couple neighborhoods that have frankly had a significant amount of ongoing residential construction where several neighbors, and it's sequential, so over 2 years, 6 homes in close proximity have been undergoing, 4-month renovations. We've got, I think, 3 neighborhoods that have had that kind of impact. So that's a harder one when we look at, because I tend to agree with you. Those are where that's where the local neighbors are really much more frustrated about the impact. When do they get that break from that noise and activity?
Any other questions about the report before we go into
Yeah.
the public hearing?
I've got one.
Yeah, Councilmember
So
Durham.
this is a citywide thing. There's no exemptions. The school, the churches, there's no exemption to the noise ordinance, correct?
As it's written now, no.
Okay. So as of, just so we're clear on this, there's no landscaping by any contract services on the weekends allowed in Yountville, correct? Okay.
That would produce noise.
As it's written here,
Noise related, correct.
noise related, okay. Thank you.
So that could be as simple as somebody blowing their commercial parking lot. That would be prohibited.
Correct.
Because it's operation of a gas or battery powered blow.
The question I have for you is holidays. How does that play into these definitions?
Holidays are considered weekends. And so as it's written in the ordinance, I didn't go over it in my verbal report, but in the ordinance, if you're not permitted to use that equipment on a weekend, you aren't permitted to do it on a holiday
So
either.
there is language that I just didn't read it in the ordinance itself.
In the ordinance, anytime
Okay,
it
I
says
didn't see
weekends,
that.
it'll say weekends and holidays.
Okay. Councilmember Dornbecker?
I just would like a clarification that on the weekends, on Saturdays only, as it's written now, the homeowner is allowed to do yard work that includes noise, correct?
As it's written now, Saturdays and 7 days a week. A holiday weekend, property owners and residents can do it.
And we're talking about still allowing that, but just restricting the hours, making it later in the morning and a little bit earlier at night. That's what we're
9 to
basically-
6
Yeah.
is across the board what is currently in the draft ordinance.
Any other questions? We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I want to recognize first that an e-comment that everyone can participate with was submitted. Denise Hughes submitted this for our consideration. It is in the record for the council to read on our tablets and is also part of the record that the clerk has if anyone is interested in that public comment. But now I'll invite any member of the public that's in the room that would like to speak. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing and invite additional discussion by council or action by council. Who would like to begin? Councilmember Dornbecker.
I would like us to discuss the Saturday time, because I do recognize that many people work during the week, and if they did want to oversee someone who's a contractor while they were in there, doing something, that from 9 to noon on Saturday seems very fair to me. So I think that is something that I could support being added into the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember or Vice Mayor or Councilmember Durham?
Go ahead.
Councilmember Durham.
I think we should expand a bit on what a contracted service is, just so everybody's clear, if we could add that. And I agree with Councilmember Dornbecker that we need to have Saturday contracted services, and I'm fine with 9 to 12 as well.
Vice Mayor?
So I'm fine with the 9 to 12, but I want to really keep it for the residents. I mean, that's what I think our intention is, because I personally don't think it's fair. We have a lot that we draw our visitors on the weekend. We have very high hotel room rates. I think it's only fair they get up early, and I see them walking around with coffee. I don't really like a bunch of commercial leaf blowers, blowing dust all over them as they're walking around town on the weekend. So I would like to keep our Main Street commercial area free of, loud, noisy leaf blowers on the weekend. So I don't really see that we've kind of have that in here. I don't know if the other council members agree with that, but I totally am fine with residents. I mean, I don't want to micromanage it, but does anybody see a way that we could still ban, things in the commercial area?
I think if it's a consensus from the council that we add a 9 a.m. to noon Saturday construction assisted residential work, or whatever language, I think I would feel comfortable leaving it up to staff to hear what the Vice Mayor is saying, which is there needs to be a residential participation component included in that.
So it could have been interpreted two ways, at least by me. First, condition that the resident is working alongside the contractor, or second, just limit so the work is on a residential parcel.
It is, the way I'm hearing it, it needs to be, the resident needs to be engaged on site.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'm saying non-commercial.
Not necessarily cutting the piece of wood, but not out of town either. I think.
Or an empty house.
Yeah, so I don't know how narrowly we can word that without
I think
being
that's enough
overly
to
restrictive.
get something written with that rule.
I definitely would agree. I think if you're looking at something where the resident has to be on property, whether it's landscaping or construction, that gives us a place to work with.
So that way
Something
we can
about-
really ban stuff on.
On-site residential supervision or something like that.
Saturday with tenant or property owner present, yeah.
Yeah. So one other question I had before I entertain a motion, how does this compare to the county? Because I know we hear it from businesses that come from outside of Yountville and say, well, I start at 8 o'clock somewhere else or 8:30 somewhere else. Do we anticipate this being a challenge to enforce?
I would say the other communities in the county and the county itself doesn't have this as narrowly defined as Yountville does. And so there will be some inconsistencies. At the same time, Yountville is the size that this kind of stuff is able to be tracked. Whereas in a community like Napa, because of its size, it's harder to really respond unless it's complaint driven.
And if there's a way to do some kind of commercial business outreach, certainly they're supposed to be getting permits in most cases to be getting the work done in the first place. We know that doesn't always happen.
What I would say, and I think it's important to characterize the outreach and education on two fronts. One, for major projects, we've actually been using a 9 o'clock start on a lot of projects just because of the evolution. So when we've been putting that, you've seen that in some of your conditions of approval. And on certain larger projects, at the staff level, we've included that in the building permit conditions. And I will tell you, we've had some very favorable response from the neighbors. Now, we're also being fair, because that's why you note the hours go to 6. So we're allowing them to get a full day's work. It's an education outreach. Landscape will be a slightly more challenging education and outreach. Probably over half of the landscape employees working in the community don't have a business license. They're moonlighting. They're working on the side. So that's going to be a more challenging, and simply, that's where we'll do education and outreach, and we'll have to really focus on the supervision on site, because I do think that's a very fair consideration for residents that are looking to do something on their property, and they just need to learn to do it in the morning. And again, I will also echo, I think Sergeant Crawford said this well, a lot of it has to do with the neighbors having good relationships with their neighbors, and when neighbors are aware of something going on, they may not be as upset if it's going on a little bit beyond that. But I think this will give us a framework to work, be fair, and also simplify so that we have a better chance of successful enforcement, because we were hamstrung by some of the approaches in the prior language.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
So I know we're going to be hiring or have contracted with a code enforcement officer. Are we going to be able to rotate them on Saturdays so that they can?
Saturday is not currently in the program. We anticipate that we will probably be looking at bringing to you for next year's budget some enhanced code enforcement, and we may be able to get some rotating hours. But this is part of the program. You've heard of my binder project that I go through, and we actually have one for the Sheriff's Department as well that we've been working on. And part of what this will be is working with the on-duty officers in the community to realize that they need to call, because in order for us to help them, they need to call dispatch on the weekends and when these things are happening, because when a deputy goes out, they can document, we get a field incident report, and then we have the ability to do something with
Well,
it.
and this is also an application for Myville, correct? That we can have people taking a
I'm
photo
actually-
and submitting or not?
No, because that's a really good point, Mayor. It will help us to say they've documented it, but it will not in this case replace the on-site personal observation of the
No,
deputy.
of course, but
And
often the
it
violation
would
ends
be-
before
Right, but the
anybody
thing
gets
is,
there.
in making sure our sequence of getting through, we still have to work out a communication to a deputy. So that's my only concern on that for a weekend is some of those things are routed, so we got to
But
think.
sometimes, every landscape truck out there has the name emblazoned on the side.
What I would say,
so
we will work
you
on
take a
adding
photo
it.
and you submit
Yeah.
it, and you can follow up with that
We
company.
can follow, but I just want to say, if they're taking that amount of time, I really would hope that they could take one step farther and call the deputy, but
Yeah.
we got to work on that education.
Did Sergeant Hellman want to have anything to add to this? Yes. Hallman, not Hellman. Hallman.
Jeff was fanning too, if you want.
Big fan of MyVille app. And it's basically, we're moving forward to get all of the deputies using the MyVille app that either work here or around here. If it's all right, there would be no reason we couldn't document it so notification is made immediately if that's being tracked on the weekend, and at the same time, educate the deputies on the new ordinance, and then have them write an informational report with the information they collected from the contractor, resident, whatever the activity was. So there is a report, and you also know about it, and you know which one of us was involved, if that would work.
Okay.
It would.
That helps with some clarification. Thank you.
I'll take care of that.
Great. So with no other discussion, I don't think, is there an action to be proposed? I've heard adding a definition of contract services for some clarifying language, and also adding a proposal for residentially supervised noise-making activity between 9 a.m. and noon on Saturday.
If I could just get 2 points of quick clarification. First, for that 9 to noon, as long as residents or tenants, property owner, I'll say resident, is on site, is that limited to landscape, limited to construction, or at this point, we aren't differentiating the two?
I think you've removed the differentiation, so
Good.
I would not be in favor of adding it in for that narrow application.
Okay. And then second, when it comes to the definition of contracted service, what definition are you thinking of? Does
I was proposing monetary or any other.
Yeah, I would just mention procedurally at this point, I think staff would need to redraft and bring it back for a first reading because there isn't hard language on the contract definition and specifically what it would look like for residences. So to ensure that it's passed properly, get the information that we need and we can bring it back for a first reading.
I'm good with that.
We were trying to get you your ordinance tonight, but the town attorney
I
says
know,
you
but
can't
we
do
were
it.
looking at it.
Okay, that's fine. So we can potentially as quickly as the first meeting in August.
Certainly.
Not that far off. Okay, so it sounds like we're going to.
So are we still doing a motion?
I was going to say we need a motion to postpone this item to our next meeting for.
No. You need a motion on the direction that you're providing for us to bring back for first reading.
Okay, so did I summarize the? So is there a motion as I presented the?
I'll second your motion. How's that?
Yeah, all right, I made the motion, you got the language, the vice mayor seconded it. Any other discussion or clarification? Did that satisfy your interest with the Saturday? Yes. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's not
Great.
introducing and waiving the reading, but that is giving you direction to bring it back for formal action.
See you in 2 weeks, yeah.
Right. Okay. Next up, what do we have? Staff, an administrative regular item are the votes we took earlier on the Zoning and Design Review Board appointments.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Council or staff posted a notice of vacancy for ZDRB back in May, and at the close of that filing period, we received 3 applications from our incumbent members, Karen Laz, Kim Cook, and Mikhail Tigret. 2 of those applicants were interviewed earlier this evening, and one who was unable to make it to prior commitment submitted a response to questionnaires, and those were provided to council for consideration. And at the conclusion of this, staff is requesting that you reappoint the incumbent members to their 3-year terms. And should council not reappoint, then the town clerk would renotice and advertise to fill any positions that you didn't appoint to.
I move that we reappoint the incumbents to the three positions.
I second it, sorry.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes, and we were very grateful and impressed by all three of our candidates that they continue to be committed to serving on the ZDRB, so thank you to all of them for that. Council meeting reports and comments. I will very quickly report on the flood control meeting I attended today. The main takeaway from that was Mayor Joel Teckel from Napa and Supervisor Wagenknecht, along with staff, went to Washington, D.C. again to lobby for additional federal funding of the flood control project. They feel optimistic after their conversations, but until the money actually shows up, we don't know what it means. Congressman Thompson is preparing to host a colonel, basically the person in charge of the Army Corps of Engineers, for an in-person visit to the flood control project, likely to be held in August. And with that, we hope to really kind of seal a commitment from the Army Corps to continue supporting the project. Because as Mayor Teckel said, it's kind of hard to wrap up the flood control project if you can't afford to build the remaining walls to protect some of the neighborhoods down there. Okay, Napa Valley Transportation Authority meeting is tomorrow, so we'll have a report out in the future. Upper Valley Waste Management Authority, do we have a report?
Nothing. Everything's in draft right now. We're looking at contracts and just a lot. Nothing's really been determined yet.
Okay. I asked the town manager to add this next item on the agenda for a very brief consideration. I don't know if you all have, but I've been approached by several residents of our town and of the immediate neighborhoods outside of Yountville about concerns related to the Yountville Hill Winery project. What I wanted us to discuss is, based on our protocol, it would not be appropriate for me or anyone else on the council individually to take a formal position that would represent us. What I ask is if there is interest in me working with the town manager and potentially staff to determine if there are negative impacts that might be felt if this project moves forward in its current condition, that we as a council would like to comment on to the Board of Supervisors, because it is being, it has reached approval from the Planning Commission, but it's being appealed, and so the Board of Supervisors are likely going to be rehearing that as it's headed to court, and et cetera, et cetera. But it is a proposal that includes elements such as 100,000 gallons of production on a parcel that's slightly smaller than 11 acres on the hill just north of, it's a little over a mile north of Yountville. 50,000 annual visitors have been approved, and there's significant concern, some of it that might relate to us, about traffic, water, noise, and other impacts. I would want us to limit any comment to things that are pertinent to Yountville and not take a broader position. I'm not looking to take a broader position on this project or any other projects in the county, but just as this relates to us specifically, we have a bit of a precedent in this when there was consideration of a winery immediately to the north of us on Yount Mill Road, and we did make comments about some environmental and other impacts. So if it's the council's desire, I can work with the town manager on drafting a letter, bringing it back to the council for consideration, see if it makes sense to submit to the County Board of Supervisors. Any thoughts? Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I certainly support our having, input into, because it will have impacts on us in terms of traffic, and I really worry about safety on our roads, because, well, it's actually Highway 29, but there'll be trucks turning left from the other property that they own into that property around a blind curve. So I'm very concerned about it, and I think that I really support you getting involved in finding out what we, as much as we possibly can to have a say for Yountville.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts? Any other comments?
I agree completely. It will be an impact on us one way or another through all those issues that all those items you just stated. So I think I would love to see a letter out there, especially for the members of the Yountville as well, all our community members.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Vice Mayor?
I totally agree too. I'm just trying to think maybe we can even get our attorney to give us some strategy here, because it's not coterminous with our property. So, I don't want it to look like, we could cherry pick how far out do we go. So I'm in total support of doing that and just, really getting the appropriate findings that we can, justify to, I want as much meat on the bones as we can get.
Well, what I would say to that is that we'll work closely with our attorney as well as town manager and any other staff that it makes sense. I mean, it might be Sandra and Nathan as well. We're going to see impacts on Yount Mill Road, which will impact Yount Street. It'll impact Madison. I mean, there are those types of issues.
I also think you start with some basic, there are some consistencies and impacts of the ag preserve and what is expected to be in the rural area and what is expected to be in the urban area, and this will allow us to draw some of the analysis on the event center production component, which, based on the definitions in the ag preserve, are clearly supposed to be in the incorporated community. So there's some basics that I think we can put together that are defensible to show the council's concern about a project that is in our immediate adjacent area. So I mean,
especially with the Dodd bill, which suggests that Napa County and San Bernardino County can be, municipalities can be asked to extend municipal services into the county now. So I don't want that coming. So.
Yeah, it basically would be like our local environmental impact report is what this is kind of getting at.
Yeah, I'll certainly help.
Okay.
We have but the first thing is you all need to provide that direction for us, because we generally, and this is also one of the topics that you've indicated we will be talking about later, is perhaps modernizing our town council protocols regarding legislative and lobbying. But this one has enough of a nexus and connection with regard to the ag preserve impacts on communities. 50,000 vehicle turns, maneuvers, will have an impact on traffic, not only on 29, but Yount Mill Road and the other impacts. So,
and they're using our name.
That one, I know that's frustrating.
Isn't that ours?
I know that is frustrating to a lot of us,
town.
but the geographic feature is called Yountville Hill, and I don't have a trademark on that I can go exercise.
So just to be clear again, this is really to be specific about negative environmental impacts. It's not to make an official
We have a very
stand
competent
one way or
staff
the other
that-
on this
and
project.
We will raise, I think the appropriate thing is you will raise your concerns about the project so that will get addressed right. But
And one thing we need to do also, I don't know specifically the timeline for the appeal and some of the other legal process.
we will
so
find
need to
out. Well, my only
check on
concern may be we may not have time, depending on that, to come back before the next formal council meeting, so we need to find that out.
That's also why I wanted to bring it up now, is that in case we can get a letter drafted before our meeting in August, even though I'm not going to be here, it can be considered by the rest of you and potentially sent out immediately after that.
Our team, I think we have a good grasp of this situation, so we'll be
Okay.
able to put together a thoughtful letter.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the consideration. So that's sufficient direction per our protocols, right?
Well, as long as you all confirm that. So
We
I
all
need
just
you
agreed to
confirm
do
that.
it. Okay. Any other reports or announcements? I do see that we have a closed session item here for consideration as it relates to conference with real property negotiator as stated. Do we anticipate any reportable action out of this? No? So we will be adjourning after we come out of that closed session to our Tuesday, August 2nd meeting. We do not anticipate any action to be reported out of our closed session, but we are going to now go into that closed session.